Forward looking, laying it off. Gaston! Hat trick!
Ariel sends it in off of Gressel. Made it to Elliott. Oh, the bicycle! Julian Carranza! A spectacular finish! Philadelphia doubles its lead.
Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. It's the moment we've all been waiting for. I feel like it's been months. It's not really been, but we're finally got the Philadelphia Union, the official end of the season press conference in terms of discussing what was the 2024 Philadelphia Union season. The season that we can all agree that ended in major disappointment, and we got to listen to Ernst Tanner give his thoughts on, what the future holds for the club, what the process looks like with hiring a first-team manager. And like we've done the last two episodes, we have had Jose Nunez on. And so why not have Jose Nunez with us once again? So Jose, live with us on the podcast 3 times in a row. First time. Jose, happy Thanksgiving. How you doing, dude?
Well, soon to be Thanksgiving. I'm doing well, man. No, I appreciate it. It was unfortunate that you couldn't join the press conference today. Obviously we texted a little bit and sort of figured out, what a question that you really wanted answered, which I think we did. But nonetheless, it's officially the off season, right? Like, this was the last bit that we were waiting on. Obviously, congratulations to Matt Real and the folks at Colorado Springs. He was the very last player to finish his 2024 season, and he finished it the best way possible, which is obviously holding silverware and texting with him back and forth. He's very, very happy where he's at, and hopefully he wants to stay there, I think. But it's hard to believe, man, that the season came and went. It was obviously very long, but it's weird that it's already over, right? In terms of like everything that would be 2024, like wrapped up nicely. Though I think you could argue that a new coach or a hire is probably the bow that puts it all away.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ernst Tanner spoke briefly about where things stand, and we can talk about that towards the end of the show and everything. But we did get the roster news, which we've been waiting on. I know you and I had been texting back and forth for many days, many conversations on the phone. When do we think they'll drop it? And to, I guess, nobody's surprised, really. The Union released the roster a couple days before Thanksgiving. And then at the end of that press release, it said, oh, wait, by the way, the following day at 9:30 in the morning, we'll have our press conference with Ernst Tanner. And I got a couple messages from people like, I didn't even know there was a press conference. I saw you had people on Twitter comment to you and say, oh, typical of the Union to sneak this by, where nobody expected a press conference, and here the Union saying, oh, here's a press conference. And yeah, sure enough, there it was. And I think only you, Jonathan Tannenwald, and Kevin Kincaid were the only ones who asked questions. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about just leaving it very last minute.
Yeah, it I don't know. I sense that there were moving pieces. Actually, I know that there were moving pieces that maybe they were waiting for to the tail end to figure out what happens. Again, like as I hear, but yeah, it's tough for folks like us, right? That do this for a hobby or very little amounts of money, like funny money type of thing, to carve out that time in the middle of the day. You work, I work, we're busy. I have kids, you don't, but nonetheless, like time is tough to find, and for it to just be tossed the day before a major holiday it's interesting and sort of maybe par for the course for the way that this year has gone, and it's unfortunate, but nonetheless, it really did feel Friday night news dumpy type of vibe to it. But we got some answers. I think we actually walked away with maybe more questions, actually absolutely more questions than answers. But nonetheless, Ernst capped off the year with this press conference that was 20 plus minutes, which is actually pretty long for him, I think.
Yeah, 21 minutes, I think, exactly. And I mean, I felt so bad because I didn't know that the Union were live streaming it at first. And I was like, crap, I got to take my laptop with me at work and just hopefully let this go and record and hope for the best. But then after the press conference, I noticed that my laptop did not record audio whatsoever, and this is probably too much behind the scenes information for people. But regardless, it's my show, so we'll share it. And then I saw the Union live stream it, so I was like, okay, thank goodness, we're good to go, and all squared away. So we do have sound bites, sound clips. If you guys are watching live on YouTube and Facebook, which you were live the last 2 times on Twitter, but I forgot that my Twitter Premium ran out, so I'm trying to re-up that, but it's trying to say, even though I just paid for Twitter Live, that I don't have Twitter Premium. So whatever. We're cool with the 16 people that are watching us on YouTube and Facebook and wherever else people are listening to this podcast. But I didn't tell you about this, Jose, and I'm going to ask you anyway. So I was listening to my end of the season press conference, beginning of the season predictions.
Yes.
And I was listening to me talk about who I thought would be MVP and everything. And yes, we know this was a disappointing season, not the way that Union fans, people in the media would have expected the season to go. But as you look at it as a whole, not just MLS, but CONCACAF Champions Cup, Leagues Cup, now that the season's officially done, do you have any player that stands out to you that would be considered MVP for this Union team? I know I'm putting you on the spot. No idea whatsoever. I can take this if you want.
Gosh, I mean, I would have said, actually, considering the way that the season went after he departed, I would probably say like Jose Martinez, how good he was at some points during his stint this year. But gosh, probably Kai. He had to be Kai, right?
Yep, that's exactly what I was going with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the guy just puts up numbers, and I forget how I asked it to Jim, but it was sort of like, like despite his flaws in terms of emotional and some would dub it as German as he is, the guy puts up numbers, and he backs up his talk with his play on the field. So it's interesting that Kai, of all players, had his best season. And yes, cynical people may point to the fact that he's just tossing balls in and crosses, set pieces, et cetera, inflate his numbers. But nonetheless, like, he had some incredible deliveries this year that just could not find the heads of Sam Adeniran, for example, and eventually Ty Baribo got involved, obviously, and yes, Sam was a late addition nonetheless. But yeah, no, I did absolutely have the best season this year.
Yeah, I think a lot of Union fans will probably say Ty Baribo just because of how he came on towards the second half of the season. I mean, won Golden Boot with Leagues Cup. I don't think anybody saw this coming, and had a fantastic season. But you look at Kai's numbers, 45 appearances, he played in every single game this season for the Union. And when we get into this roster breakdown and whatnot, one glaring hole is who's the backup left back. Yeah, you have Isaiah LaFleur, who you got last season from Houston Dynamo 2, but he tore his ACL in the preseason, and so he wasn't able to feature for the club. And then we saw Frankie Westfield play as a left back for Union 2 all season long. I'm not sure left back's his best position at the next level, but and we'll see if he even gets a homegrown contract. So he only technically has a Union 2 contract. So we'll see where things stand for that. But Kai Wagner, 45 appearances every single game last year, 1 goal, 12 assists, and 3,927 minutes played. I mean, 12 assists is fantastic from a left back. And like you said, I mean, he could have had so much more. I mean, look at the chances that he created for Sam Adeniran, chances that he's created for Julian Kranza, chances he's created for Daniel Gazlag. The Union just unable to put away a lot of these chances that Kai created. I think Jack McGlynn definitely deserves a shout. We saw him, impress early on in the first half of the season that eventually earned him that call up to the Olympics with the U.S. national team. I think you also look at Nathan Harriel. He had a fantastic season too, going to the Olympics. Some people would maybe argue that Quinn Sullivan could be in the argument, but I think without a doubt, it's gotta be Kai Wagner for me. So I'd be curious, people here in the comments, having Jillian comment here says Kai was the best this season easily. Scoop on the Dupe says Baribo. Michael says Kai consistent overall. Quinn picked it up near the end.
Quinn had a strong start too, right? If you think about his CONCACAF Champions Cup start, it was pretty strong.
Yeah, it was. And you and I were actually talking about that too. Like, watching Jim Curtin play in pretty much every single game, it's like he's trying his best to get him on that Olympic roster, and ultimately didn't make it. We know just only Jack and Nate, and it would have been crazy to see 3 Union players wind up going to the Olympics. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, to have 2 players alone go to the Olympics is a pretty good deal. And yes, the season was pretty bad, but there's good moments too. And I look at those 2 young players that progressed, that went to the Olympics. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Who knows what the future holds for them? But that's something that's good. Again, Todd Berebo, second half of the season, you didn't know what you had in him last season, and you saw him have a fantastic Leagues Cup, fantastic second half in the season. His chemistry with Mikhail Uwer and Daniel Gazlik, that came together pretty well. Tyler comments here, says Berebo had a pretty solid season. Bruce says, yeah, Kai, but Quinn showed a lot of potential. By the way, great write-up on that book, Jose. I purchased and enjoy it. Yeah, you want to tell people about that book, Jose?
Vamp for like 2 seconds.
Okay, so Jose got the fortunate opportunity to review this book called Gloria. The publisher is called Gloria, I believe. Jose's back with the book, so people who aren't watching this live, Jose, go ahead.
I forget that this is also a podcast. So no, that the folks over at Gloria had posted about this itty bitty book. My hand. Well, here we go. A beer can, for size comparison. Nice little size for what could be a nice little coffee table reader. But yeah, I got the opportunity to review it. It's about the soccer scene in the city of Philadelphia. And sure, it talks about the Union, the Sons of Ben. There's an interview with Jim Curtin and Chris Donovan. But ultimately, what's most interesting to me is sort of like the stories off the beaten path. And that was maybe the excerpt of my review that I was really, proud of in terms of like how to really describe this book, because it talks about the Kensington Soccer Club. It talks about the Casa Soccer League, the Unity Cup, the Icarus Cup, how Icarus came to be I think it's an incredible jersey brand. I don't own one yet, but seeing the styles, etc., they're beautiful. So $15. You can find it at glory.studio, and it comes from England. When they shipped me this, it didn't take too long, and frankly, it was packaged so nicely that there was no damage whatsoever. So rest assured that if you place an order sooner rather than later, you should be getting it by Christmas time if you're trying to gift it to somebody. And yes, I'm raving about it. I did knock it a little bit because within the book they suggest that you go to Pat and fucking Gino's for cheesesteaks. Like that's the worst opinion that anybody can have, frankly. So there's no money exchanged. I wasn't paid for the review. I was just genuinely looking for something different to do, and reviewing a tiny little photozine book was sort of what I wanted to do. So I hope folks enjoyed it, and if you want to buy one, it has my vote of approval. Should that matter even to you?
Yeah, so I didn't know we were doing show and tell. I'm glad Bruce brought up the comment there about the book. So you talked about Icarus. I mean, beautiful jersey. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, Matt Ralph from then the Brotherly Game, now Philly Soccer Now. Is it? Yeah, it's Philly Soccer Now. Invited me to be a part of the Brotherly Games Icarus Cup team, and Luke McLung from the Doopy Brothers podcast designed these jerseys. Again, if you guys aren't watching this live, go back and look at the jersey. It's so sick. It's sharp. It was called the Philadelphia Ringers. Love this kit from Icarus. And then this January, got my second Icarus kit at the United Soccer Coaches Convention out in Anaheim. Myself and Jillian Albany also got these. And yeah, there was a limited number of jerseys made. I think, 250. So I got 17 out of 250. I don't know if people can see that, but yeah, pretty cool to get a limited edition jersey. Just remembering the soccer convention out there in Anaheim. So yeah, Icarus, great brand, and a lot of sick jerseys on the website, which is pretty cool too, that they give the option for people, even if you don't play for those teams, to order these jerseys online, and they're relatively cheap compared to like the Adidas, the Nike jerseys. And I know a lot of people say, yeah, just go DH Gate route to get your jerseys and whatnot. But hey, support somebody local, support Icarus, great Philadelphia brand. And this book, $15, you said, right, Jose?
$15. I don't know how much the shipping is. They literally sent me a PDF to start reviewing, and then they put this in the mail for me. Though they did mention that it can be found at certain Barnes and Nobles. So I'm not sure how to check that. I did a cursory check on like barnesandnobles.com and nothing popped up. So it might be a very like boutique type of thing, maybe like inside of the city of Philadelphia, not where I am in the outskirts, perhaps. But honestly, I think it's a perfect stocking stuffer to sort of just put out there for the soccer person that you may or may not know. And frankly, as I said in the review, like this is such a good book because it's appealing to folks who understand maybe the scene better than most, but also perfect for that suburban parent who wants to learn about soccer in Philadelphia or introduce a kid to the soccer in Philadelphia, or ultimately just wants a cool book for their bookcase or their coffee table. So give it a whirl, follow them on Twitter, tell them I sent you. Again, I don't get jack shit, but nonetheless, it's nice to know that, people are using this review and making good decisions.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better. So thank you, Bruce, for bringing that up. It's good to have you guys interacting with us live on social media and letting us have a little bit of a show and tell as Jose cracks open what are you having to drink? People always ask you, Jose, so why not plug that as well?
So I'm continuing to polish off the beverages for my son's second birthday. It's some sort of seltzer thing based off of Death Row Records.
Nice.
It's just a grape seltzer, and it's good. I enjoy it, but it's my second. So let's go.
So anyway, let's go ahead and get into the show notes. What we said we were going to talk about, and the 2025 roster decisions have been announced by the club 2 days ago, and we go ahead and see Ernst Tanner speak about those decisions. And so I guess, we should probably start off before we talk about those roster decisions, what ideal roster size Ernst Tanner is looking for. And so the Union currently have 24 players under contract for the 2025 season. They had 2 players that were automatic. Well, Mika Uwar's contract was automatically triggered, and then they exercised the option on Isaiah LaFleur, which took the total to 24. So 22 that were already under contract, but then you had Mikael Uwers, who's automatically got triggered, and then they picked up the option for Isaiah LaFleur. That's how Ernst Tanner mentioned 24, because you and I went back in the press release, it said 22, and then Ernst said 24 today, and I'm like, oh, he's talking about the 2 options, that one that already triggered, and then they picked up Isaiah's. So Jose asked a brilliant question. I will go ahead and plug you away about what's the ideal roster size that the Union are looking for. We know last year, I think it was 31, 32. I don't know if you know the number off the top of your head, but it was a lot. I think that was the most that we've seen potentially ever for the Union. And with not as many competitions this year for the club, you don't expect there to be as big of a roster. And yeah, Ernst Tanner dove into that and said what we can expect this roster to look like next season.
The simple answer is there is nowhere an ideal number. And with a salary cap, you always need to fit in what you can fit in. And of course, then there is a number coming out. But somewhere in recent seasons where we had less tournaments, and by the way, this will be the part, or this will be the case in this season as well, because we all know we don't play the Champions Cup, but we are also out of Leagues Cup. And I think it's even a positive for us in this moment, as I know that our fans don't overly love our Leagues Cup, but we are definitely not getting so many midweek games and have more time to really focus on training and development, and that's the positive note. But it will be somewhere between 25 and 27 players. Yeah, that's a good size, and I'm more emphasized on the quality anyway than having 30 or even more players.
All right, so Ernst Tanner said around 25, 27 players, but the smart Union fans picked up on something that Ernst Tanner completely let slip in there. And I don't even know if you want to discuss that, Jose, or not, because I think, it caught you by surprise as well. And when I went back and listened, I was like, he really said that the Union won't be playing in Leagues Cup in 2025. And this is insane. We're going into the third official season with Leagues Cup, and we're seeing, again, potential changes to this competition. As we all know, last year they introduced the coefficiencies for how you did the previous season in the league, and then that gave you a ranking to determine, okay, who hosts games and whatnot. And now here we go again, potentially changing the format. And as it's been the first 2 seasons, every single team in Mexico, every single MLS team qualified for Leagues Cup. And now it sounds like, to Ernst Tanner, Union won't be playing in that competition. And the only thing I can think of is because they finished too low in MLS, and Leagues Cup hasn't announced it. I don't know if you got anybody to comment on what the changes are going to be, but that is something that Ernst Tanner shouldn't have announced, I feel like.
I always want to err on the side of caution and maybe give folks not an easy out, but also an explanation of what could make sense, right? Think about all the potentials to this, right? Maybe just lost in translation. Obviously, as I try to quote people like Kai or Ernst specifically, or God, anybody else, right? In that clubhouse, Ernst is not the best English speaker. We know that, right? He kept on messing up the word, was it respectable when he was talking about, like a respectable offer? I can't remember what word he was using, but it was just so obvious that, like, okay, I know what he means. I'm not gonna correct him, or like, I understand, right?
Respectively,
Yeah. So with this one, I wonder if he meant to say something else, but I also know that he should know that words matter, and this was just very specific, because not only did he specify by group, I mean, even said CONCACAF, right? Like CONCACAF Champions Cup, like, or whatever. He was very, like, obviously pinpointing that one, that to not get the next one right would have been really weird. So it seems like there's going to be changes. I know Jonathan Townwald has obviously way better connections than I do in terms of some groups. So he mentioned that he got an answer from Leagues Cup organizers saying that there's more news to come, not outright denying it whatsoever. So there's that. I reached out to Erica and Nico over at the club to try to get some comment or clarification on Ernst's comments. And this was not immediately after the press conference. It was maybe a little bit after, but got zero response. And I totally get that, it's also the holiday. I mean, it's their own doing that it's right next to a holiday. So no response whatsoever. So it's interesting that that's the point that we're all walking away with. But nonetheless, man, like 25 to 27 players is sort of what the Union want to work with next season. And as you look at this roster, there's already 24. And Ernst was very open, not just in this press conference, but the day after Jim was released, or whatever it was, the week after that, players are going to be added to all facets of the team: defense, midfield, and attack. And was very specific to say that there will not be a signing for goalkeeper. So there's that. That's settled. If I got that correctly from his comments today. So yeah, bodies are going to have to go for new ones to come in. It's just wondering who's not going to be here in about 90 days.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can go ahead and start to dissect that roster. So I'm sure everybody's seen the players that are coming back, and we don't really have to go over that. It's the players that had their options declined, or players that are just completely out of contract that won't be coming back. And so players that had options but they were declined were Jamir Berdecio, Brandan Craig, Jack Elliott, Matt Real, Joaquin Torres. Players that were out of contract: Sam Adeniran, Alejandro Bedoya, Leanne Flach, Jim Curtin, Ernst Tanner said Alejandro Bedoya, Brandan Craig, and Jack Elliott are all in negotiations with the club, with potentially coming back. And like we said, 24 players. And so if you bring back Bedoya, Craig, and Jack Elliott, well, then you're 27 players. And you look at the roster as it stands. I mean, I don't think anybody's confident would say, yep, this is the roster that's going to win MLS Cup next season if the roster stayed as what it is. And Ernst Tanner made it very clear that, look, we're not going to just stay with this roster. We're going to bring players in. And he said every area of the field they're going to upgrade and make changes to. And so the way I took it is, okay, yes, we know the roster stands right here at 24 players, but who's to say that there isn't more movement at the as the season progresses? And I'm trying to pull up my document. Hopefully you guys can see that on the screen. Can you see that, Jose?
Yep, I can see that.
Cool. Hopefully it's not too small. Maybe it is. But if you go ahead and look, so as things stand, your striker depth is Mikel Orr, Marcus Anderson, Ty Baribo, Chris Donovan, Nelson Pierre. In the yellow, I have everybody that's a homegrown. In attacking midfield, Daniel Gaza, Kevin Sullivan, Jeremy Raffanello. On the left side of the diamond, Jack McGlynn, CJ Olney, both homegrown players. On the right side of the diamond, you have Quinn Sullivan, Jesus Bueno, David Vasquez, defensive midfielder, Joaquin Torres, Nick Periano, left back, Kai Wagner, LaFleur, Alawatu Makanya, Jacob Glesnes, right back, Nathan Harriel, Olivier Bazo, goalkeeper. Ernst Tanner said there wouldn't be any changes there. So you look at Andre Blake, Andrew Rick, and Oliver Zemla. That center back pairing, though, so scary. Only 2 center backs on your roster, and one of them being Makanya, who is yet to feature for the first team.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And, as I look at this depth, this chart, not even depth, because I know we're sort of just slapping this together so we have an idea of what the team's looking like. I wouldn't be shocked if an Andrew Rick is someone who goes on loan next year, with obviously the option to terminate a loan should anything happen to Blake that just leaves him with Semla. But if you think about Ernst and his comments today, does it really make sense to have 3 keepers for a team that's basically only going to be competing in MLS regular season games and maybe US Open Cup if Leagues Cup's not an option and there's no CONCACAF Champions Cup? Does it make sense to have 3 keepers? I would think not. And it's pretty obvious that Semla is probably not going to feature for Union 2. And I would go ahead and, guess that Rick is technically graduated from Union 2 as well. So really no need to have 3 keepers for the season. And you're right. That center back depth is interesting. Considering some of the news that broke earlier this week with potentially, as I understand it,
go ahead.
Neil, there we go, perfect, Drew, Neil Pierre, his deal in January becoming a homegrown. So it'll be interesting to see what they do center back wise, and it sort of puts an impetus for the Union or to the Union to get something done, whether it's moving on from Jack Elliott or bringing him back and negotiating something lower than his $800 and some $1,000 deal that he's at right now. I think it's nearly $900,000, right?
Yeah. So I have it. I don't know if you can see right here, the bottom left hand in the corner. I'll go ahead and try to scroll that. The 2024 salaries, and so I calculated it with Flach not coming back, Bedoya not coming back, potentially not coming back, Adeniran not coming back, Berdecio not coming back, Jack Elliott potentially not coming back, Brandan Craig potentially not, Joaquin Torres and Matt Rial not coming back. The Union in 2024 salary would save about $2.5 million. And that's for a team that doesn't spend a lot of money. I mean, that's a good chunk of change with all those players not potentially coming back. And I mean, you can definitely find ways to use that around bringing in potential new upgrades, which again, Ernst Tanner said every phase of the team other than goalkeeper, they will be bringing in players. And I know some trust has been lost within this fan base because fans weren't happy with what was said at the town hall. And then 2 weeks ago when we had Jay Sugarman and Ernst Tanner, fans weren't happy with the updates we got in that press conference. And so I understand why some fans feel like, no matter what Ernst Tanner says, they don't believe him, that all trust is lost. But you look at that. I mean, there's no denying the facts that that's $2.5 million that the Union were spending on these players last season. Now that they have opened up, that they might not all potentially come back.
What's interesting too, Todd, is that, as you look at 2025, some of these numbers were definitely going to be bigger, right? If you think about Jack Elliott, he was probably going to get closer to, I would certainly guess, over $900,000, right? And same with Joaquin Torres, if the option would have been picked up. Same with Brandan Craig. a bigger number, probably gauging somewhere between 10% probably increase in pay for all of these guys. So that figure for 2025 is even larger than what the 2024 salary is. Not massively, but just, thinking about basic accounting and salary work there. Yeah, it's a lot of flexibility. It's just, are they willing to shed more weight and be comfortable with the faces that are, or the names, I should say, that are on your depth chart there, right? Like, is the team comfortable, and is the like that defensive mid position, is Danley really where he wants to be,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
where he should be as a defensive mid? Or, because you and I, as we understand it, he should be more of a shuttler as an 8. So, and even if the case is as it is now listed on your sheet, like, is Perry, say Danley twists his ankle, are the Union really going to trot out Nick Periano to an MLS game? I don't know. It's feeling mighty thin there in specific positions.
Yeah, exactly. And then Drew actually brings up a good point too. Then you have the sales of Jose Martinez and Julian Kranza. Both their salaries come off the book too. And so, yeah, I understand, and I'm not trying to make excuses whatsoever for the club where people aren't happy with the little bit of money that they don't spend. But let's look at the players. Like, Ernst Tanner knows this roster needs an upgrade. He started his press conference saying that we need a roster overhaul. And for fans that think the Union aren't doing anything, I've seen fans say, "Oh, well, look at Cincinnati. They've gone in, made a signing the day after they got knocked out of the playoffs," or people talking about, "Oh, look, uh, Olivier Bizot just got a contract extension." It's like, these deals happen months before they're announced. There's so much work going on behind the scenes, and there's potentially moves that hopefully can be announced by the club in the coming days. I mean, how many times have we seen the Union during the December break? Jose Martinez is one a couple days before Christmas that got announced in December. Sergio Santos, I believe, was in December or early January. So it's not unlike the club not to announce these signings like in the middle of the offseason. It's like, oh, look, we got early Christmas gift. We got a player that we never heard of. And so many fans got so happy with Jose Martinez after they saw him play his first game against LAFC. Nobody knew who this guy was. And again, I know I've been on this podcast multiple times complaining about how Ernst Tanner hasn't hit on his last couple of transfer windows. But again, just looking at the amount of salary that they've now opened up, you can go to maybe a higher level player and convince them, hey, look, play in MLS to develop in MLS. We can pay you a little bit higher salary than you were making at your previous club, because we have the flexibility to overspend for you, because we have the availability in GAM and TAM, because as we may or may not remember, the Union did make a trade with Nashville last year that traded away an international roster spot that got them some GAM for next season. And again, the sales of Julian Kranza, the Union are getting zero for him, but they open up his roster. Jose Martinez, it was what, 200,000. Damian Lowe, low amount as well, but you can convert that money into GAM, and any little bit helps. And so it's going to be a big offseason for the Union. But the reason I bring up the international roster spot is because you have currently Ty Baribo, Jesus Bueno, Danley John Jock, Oluwetu Makanya, Oliver Zemla taking up international roster slots. That leaves you with two open. Oliver Zemla could potentially get a green card. I mean, he should, right? He's been in the country forever playing at the college level. Jesus Bueno, could he be a player that potentially gets a green card in the offseason? And then you really open things up to potentially bring in even more international players. So the Union do have themselves set up to make quite a bit of moves this offseason. And that's what Ernst Tanner said. It was about getting this roster in a position where they can make those moves.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Right, in terms of Oliver and some of the other moves, Jesus probably is another player that, when you think about the time that it took Jose Martinez to get a green card, it's sort of lining up to be around that same time too for Jesus in terms of length in the country. But to the moves, I see a lot of names on this sheet that could stick around and be Union 2 players, or if there is ambition, like, does Nelson Pierre sticking around really make sense? Does again, like I would sense that CJ Olney and Vasquez, et cetera, are probably going to be mainly Union 2 players, maybe elevate them a little bit, but they're going to be playing there on weekends. I'm intrigued to see how the team manages Kevin Sullivan. And by team, I mean the new coach. Is he as fond, or is this new coach as fond of the Sullivan experiment as Jim was? Obviously a big hand in getting that signature to paper as we understand it. So I'm sure that puts a lot of fear into MLS marketing if Kevin Sullivan suddenly is not, able to play as much because he's not favored. But it's really fascinating to see so much flexibility, even if Ernst during his press conference mentions that, there's flexibility, but we're also in some spots in a way also sort of handcuffed to not be able to do X, Y, or Z. So it's sort of like mixed messaging all at once.
Yeah. And so, like we talked about, in the press release, it said that the club's in negotiations with Alejandro Bedoya, Brandan Craig, and Jack Elliott in terms of potentially coming back to the club. And Ernst Tanner came out and talked about Jack Elliott, where things stand contract-wise. He said, quote, "With Jack, it's a little bit different. He turned down an offer which was really respectable and looking for more money, and that's what we can't do just in regards of roster flexibility," end quote. Jack Elliott's been a player that's played 270 appearances for the club, 14 goals, 10 assists in 23,404 minutes played. That's a lot of minutes played for the 77th pick back in the 2026, 2027 MLS draft. I think it was the 2026 MLS Super Draft from West Virginia University. And the guy's been
2016.
Really, really, really solid player for the Union, a player that came late in the draft and has played multiple positions for the Union. And how can you forget what he did in 2022 against LAFC? I mean, if the Union win that, he's getting a statue built for him outside of Subaru Park for his 2 goals in that game. I mean, a center back out of all people. And I understand why you would decline the option for Jack Elliott. Like you said, Jose, that, okay, it's probably not going to be a big increase on these guys who had options, but it's still going to be a significant enough increase. And you look at the season Jack Elliott had. A lot of fans were complaining about the season that Jack Elliott had, Jacob Glesnes had, saying, hey, look, we don't want Jacob Glesnes back. Complaining about, Damian Lowe's not it. But Jack Elliott didn't have a great season either. And Ernst Tanner brought up, this might have been to your question, Jose, where he said, look, in 2022, we conceded 26 goals. 2023, we conceded 41. And then this season, 52, 55, something like that for the Union. Every single year, that number's went up. And he was quick to point out that it's because of our center backs. It's clear that we need an upgrade there at the center back. And I think Ernst Tanner, like you said, we gave Jack Elliott a respectable offer. But there's no way they're going to overpay him, especially for the poor season he had last season.
Yeah, and I don't know Jack. We get to talk to him periodically after games. He's always been very polite, very articulate, and open to answering our questions. He's always hanging out and waiting for all questions to be answered, and then he, exits left. I also understand that he's expecting a child. So I think that there's a little bit of revisionist history in terms of the way that the fan base feels about Jack Elliott and wanting him back and wanting, I think I saw a couple of comments saying, you pay the man what he needs. He's having a child, this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, man, if we were backing up 4 or 5 months ago, a lot of people in this fan base, and I get that it's a echo chamber in terms of the fan base and social media, but there's a good portion of the fans that were ready to walk him to the airport if they really needed to, right? Like, I think if there was a GoFundMe at that time to get him an Uber to the airport, a lot of people would have chipped in. So listen, the numbers, and I posed this question to you, Todd, was, do his numbers since his new deal in 2022, that incredible year, do they warrant any type of race whatsoever? And if you really take a look at them, and I'm working on a little write-up about that, I don't see it. And I'm saying that as, someone who's strictly looking at numbers, sort of like a bean counter. I don't see it, but there is something to be said about a man who's been at this club for about half its lifetime. Of the club itself, which is sort of crazy to think that he's been nearly there for 7.5 years or whatever. So there's something to be said about that, but it's also, this is what have you done for me lately type of business. And these past 2 years have been very difficult for him, specifically this past year. So we'll see. I think there's seniority gets you so much. The rest really comes down to your current play now and what's next in the coming years. I mean, just ask Alejandro Bedoya, like in terms of the pay cut he had to take to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mean, it's clear that this team needs an upgrade at center back. So many fans on social media, and I know you said it, and people on social media don't speak for the whole fan base, but everybody can see that, center back was an issue, that whether it be Damian Lowe, whether it be Jacob Glitson playing too aggressive, stepping out, and now the team's just running back trying to get in position because they missed the ball at midfield, and now the shape's all gone, and now they're conceding a goal, which wasn't typical for this team back in 2022, 2021, and one of the best defensive units in all of MLS. And yeah, it hasn't been the case this season, wasn't really the case in 2023. And yeah, I mean, would you pay Jack Elliott close to $900,000, a little bit more than $900,000? We don't know what that option for 2025 would look like. Would you be paying Jacob Glesnes close to the same amount of money? No, I don't think you can for the type of season that they had. I mean, it's clear that they need an upgrade for center back, and so one of those guys would have been going on the bench. And you mean to tell me you're going to pay one of those center backs almost $1 million to sit on your bench to rotate in and out? No, not at all. And that's not good business. And so I don't know what that number was that they offered Jack Elliott. Obviously, Jack Elliott wasn't happy with it, and we'll see where things stand. But he did also talk about Alejandro Bedoya, Ernst Tanner, that is. And this one caught me by surprise a little bit, that Ernst seemed a little bit more open to the fact that they would have Bedoya back at the club. End quote. He said, "We see Ali as a very important player in regards of the locker room and the history with the club he is having, and that's why we are trying to do everything to bring him back for that reason. But at the same time, we also have to watch our roster space, and every player you bring back who is in the senior side is limiting you down on the other hand, and that's what we need to obey. And hopefully we can find a way to come together." End quote. I mean, it's a different tone than last year. I mean, last year it seemed like Ernst Tanner did not want Alejandro Bedoya back. A lot of arguing back and forth in the media with him, with players arguing to bring back Bedoya. Jim Curtin saying he wanted Bedoya back, and well, Jim Curtin, the players get their way. Bedoya comes back for another season, and he still played a ton of minutes this year, and it looked like the writing was on the wall that, okay, well, Jim Curtin's out of the club, that there's no way that Ernst Tanner, after not wanting him back last season, is going to want to bring back Alejandro Bedoya. And he comes back and says, yeah, we want Bedoya back. He's an important player for us, for that locker room. And then he made a note about his second job. He said, Alejandro Bedoya has a second job for us, which is his front office role. I guess it's other duties as assigned. Making TikTok videos, making Instagram reels, whatever the case may be. And Ernst seemed to be happy with that role that Bedoya was filling in. But yeah, it's a different feeling than I felt last year, where these two just kept negotiating back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so I don't know your thoughts, Jose, to hear Ernst Tanner say, yeah, they're interested in bringing back Bedoya.
How different the tune is when there's no scathing pieces towards the tail end of the season from major publications like The Athletic and ESPN, etc., that deal with this guy, right? And again, Alejandro is another guy who's been a stand-up person to me personally, in terms of talking to him, speaking to him about the importance of being a Latino in MLS and making sure that, he does his best to bring in that side of the fan base to the stadium. He's been fantastic, but it's also so obvious that at this point, and he would tell me otherwise, because he's so quick to mention the statistics and mention, what was his line?
Todd? More games with him on the field than with him not on the field. Crazy stat.
Yes.
Did not know that.
So he brings in, his own stat people. He's paying for that. He's negotiating his own contracts, I think. But I struggle to see how this doesn't feel sort of like a Garrett Stubbs to sort of make a comparison to Philadelphia. Like, is this just kind of like bringing him like an olive branch to the fan base in a way. Like, I don't know. Could he help be a mentor to this gigantic pile of homegrowns that seems to be growing by the minute? Potentially. It'll be interesting, but it's just so fascinating how different the tune is around this guy this year. And if he comes back, great. But it's also something to remember when it comes down to opportunity costs. Who could they have gotten with $400,000? That's a good salary to try to lure somebody from a lower league in Europe or South America for sure to come and give it a go in MLS. So by bringing back a nearly 38-year-old or 38-year-old going on 39 for one more season as a substitute role and pay him that type of salary, or even if it's a pay cut, pay him that type of money, it's sort of hard to see why. So that's maybe where I stand. And again, no ill will towards him. I think he's obviously done so much for the club and for the city, and wish him well, whether it's with the union or maybe he's waiting out to see what Jim's doing to try to figure out where the heck he wants to go. So who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go ahead and bring up this comment by Kyle Leith. He says, I'm guessing there's an expansion draft, right? Would they protect him for that? And so there is an expansion draft with San Diego coming in. Free agency for MLS opens up on December 12th. And the 2025 MLS Super Draft is the 20th of December. And so, no, because technically Bedoya is a free agent now. And so you wouldn't protect a player that's no longer on your roster. Technically, Bedoya is not on the roster. Jack Elliott's not on the roster, so you wouldn't have to protect those guys, which makes things even more easier for the union to go ahead and protect players from potentially getting selected from San Diego, which, looking at that roster that I just had up there moments ago, it's mostly homegrowns now on the roster, and we know that those get automatically protected. So I don't know. I think the union are going to be unscathed by the expansion draft. And so Alejandro Bedoya, you do not have to put him on there, as he is technically a free agent now, and the club are in negotiations for him. We have Michael, who says, Ernst, we brought back Bedoya. Now please stop complaining about me. And says, Ernst trying to save himself from the fan base, being the man who cut Curtin and Bedoya would make him even worse. Yeah, I think for some people on social media that would 100% be the case. One other soundbite that I do want to play is another question that Jose brought up, and this is something that we both collaborated on, even though Jose framed it a lot better than I did. And that's the subject of U22. We've talked about the union going to make signings this offseason. Ernst Tanner said every single phase of this lineup, there will be signings. Well, one spot that they could potentially sign is a U22 initiative signing. They've done it with Oluwatu Makanya. They just did it with Quinn Sullivan in his new deal. And if they go 3 DPs, 3 young DP U22s, well, they have one more spot. If they go 2 DPs for U22s, and they have 2 more spots. So Ernst Tanner gave his thoughts on, okay, if we do go that route to bring in another U22 initiative player, what would make the most sense for the club? And this is what he had to say.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. If we do another under 22 player, then it will very likely be in midfield. But you can also consider our homegrown players coming up as sort of under 22 players. I mean, we have prolonged the contract with Quinn Sullivan, who was probably one of our best midfielders during the last season, and he signed recently for, let's say, under 22 conditions. And we all know about the positives of that initiative in regards of the CSP charge. So we likely will use that wherever we can, but midfield certainly is a priority.
So you heard Ernst Tanner there say a midfielder for the third U22 spot. You have Quinn Sullivan, who's a midfielder, can play as a forward. Hopefully that experiment's done now. And then you have Makanya, who's a U22 center back, and is yet to feature with the club. So I don't know. I don't think a number 10 spot makes sense for this club to go out unless you obviously sell Daniel Gazdag, which I'm not throwing anything off the table. Like, if a good enough offer comes, there's nobody on this roster, in my opinion, that's untouchable. But you look at the eights, and I can go ahead and bring it up again as the roster stands. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility with midfield spots for this roster, and oh man, here it goes. Here we go. Yeah, I mean, Quinn Sullivan locked in. I feel like starter at the 8, but who knows? I mean, you bring in a new coach, he's going to want to assess the squad, and he'll see who fits in the best. Jack McGlynn was a starter for most of last season. You would assume that he's the lock-in. Danley definitely going to be a lock-in after bringing him in the summertime. So, and then you look at Jesus Bueno, David Vasquez, CJ Olney. I mean, yeah, I mean the outside 8s I think is what I would look for in terms of another U22 signing. And you and I are both high on this initiative, Jose. We look all around the league, just the success. And you had a feeling, I think, back in March or April, Jim Curtin had mentioned to you before the Atlanta United game, maybe it was April, that, yeah, converting some of their young homegrowns into U22 spots makes sense. And that's exactly what they did this offseason with Quinn Sullivan.
It makes you wonder if maybe that's what they're trying to do with Jack. And this is their midfield improvement per se, and in terms of signing somebody who's a midfielder, though I would certainly hope not. And let's not lose track of it. This was the very first time that U22 came out of the union's mouth in regards to Quinn Sullivan, because there was no mention of it in the press release. It wasn't until Wasserman, his agency, mentioned it on a very subtle Instagram, not so subtle, but like just a random Instagram post that they put out celebrating the contract. And shout out to Vince, who I think is watching, who had shared it with me or posted it online, and sort of like, oh my God, I was right all along. And I just, like I was feeling it in my stomach the whole time. Yeah, I hope that they go out and find somebody at the U22 level, and hopefully it's a better experience or experiment than the Olwethe Makanya experiment has been, right? Someone who, it can't go much worse, honestly. I guess it can get worse, but interesting that, someone who's been at the club 2 years under these conditions in this coveted spot of the roster still has not made an appearance, whether that was a Jim decision or an Ernst decision, who knows? But nonetheless, it's really fascinating that, Olwethe just hasn't gotten that opportunity despite holding this super valuable position on the roster. So we'll see what they do. I hope that it's an external signing and not just upgrading someone's salary within the roster that's already there. But they sort of surprised us, but not really, with Quinn.
Yeah, and Drew says, really wouldn't be surprised if they sold McGlynn if a good offer came in. Yeah, I mean, a player that signed through 2025 has options for the 2026, 2027 seasons. Had a good year for the Union. I think he showed well too, or had moments in the Olympics. I mean, anytime you get selected for the Olympics, I mean, that's a huge honor. And so, again, I'm not ruling anything out. If a good enough offer comes for any player on this roster, you got to listen. You got to think about accepting that offer. And so you look at a player like Jack McGlynn, had a career year, got his most minutes, most starts for this club since being a professional. I mean, anything's on the table. Why not? But the last bit of business that Ernst Tanner talked about was wanting another striker. We talked about the striker depth being Mikael Uhre, Ty Baribo, Chris Donovan, Marcus Anderson, and Nelson Pierre. Nelson Pierre, I could definitely see him getting loaned out next season, see what the future holds for him. But one thing Ernst was wanting to bring up is this club needs another hold-up striker.
Yeah, that's what we are, in fact, looking at. And I mean, it depends a little bit of what we're doing in our key priorities, in particular with our center back, and how much money is left for the purpose. And I can imagine that we are getting a real competitive third striker. What we are definitely looking out for is somebody who is a bit better in hold-up play. And if we find the player, it doesn't matter how old he is. But we probably will do something here as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, it's going to be a big offseason in terms of center backs. And Ernst said, okay, whatever we have left, hopefully we can bring in another striker. I mean, it's obvious they want a striker in, and didn't work out with Sam Adeniran. Corey Burke, I know, kind of had the attributes of a hold-up striker, but as I was going over the list of strikers, they tried to bring in Andrew Rutten, didn't work out. But the best hold-up striker, and a lot of fans did not like this guy, and I don't know how you feel. I don't think I've ever asked you. It's Kasper Schmeichel. He's been, in my opinion, the Union's last good hold-up striker. Yeah, you had CJ Sapong before him, but Kasper Schmeichel, anytime you would throw him out there, you would pair him with a speedster, whether that be Fafa Pico, whether that be Sergio Santos. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me that Ernst Tanner would want to go back to that hold-up striker, because ideally you want to have your center backs playing those long balls up top. You want your number 6 playing those long balls. Jose Martinez was great at that, playing it into the striker that can hold up. And now you have players running in behind, whether that be a Mikael Uhr, a Ty Baribo, a Daniel Gazdag. And the Union really haven't had that, in my opinion, since Schmeichel. And so you hear Ernst Tanner say, yeah, we want a hold-up striker. And that's not Nelson Pierre. He is not a hold-up striker. That is definitely not Marcus Anderson. I know Ernst Tanner was asked about Eddie Davis. He's not a hold-up striker either. He did mention Sal Olivas. But again, Ernst Tanner said these guys are young, 18 years old. And you look at the quality of MLS play, those guys aren't ready yet. And so I'll be curious to see what this team does. Did they go the MLS route again? I'd have to look at the free agency list. I know this is something you and I, Jose, said that we need to sit down, do a little bit of a exercise looking at the free agents available. But and Chris Donovan, I can't forget Chris Donovan. I mean, even him, I don't think he's really a hold-up striker. And so, I mean, you hear Ernst Tanner say, look, this is what we're looking for in a striker. And if the money's available, we're going to go out and get that guy.
It does feel like Kasper Schmeichel was the last true hold-up striker for this team, and that's an interesting thing. I didn't even think about, considering how poorly it went for him once he departed the Union. And you know, if you think about Ernst Tanner and the moves that he has made that didn't go well, and a lot of people like to nitpick and be, you know, sort of very, and me included from time to time, and you included as well. We're not you know, shy about, you know, when we're critical, but that's one that he got right in terms of moving on from Kasper Schmeichel. Granted, Kasper went to a vastly inferior team in Chicago, so let's not make a mess out of that in terms of what he was working with. But yeah, I wonder where Ernst stands on Nelson Pierre, because he's got a big frame. I watched some of his games and he was on loan. Once he came back to the States and then went out again to the Charlotte Independence in USL, and he has a bigger frame. He seems a little raw. He was playing with Overton, who played for Manchester United. He was playing with CJ Obregon, who I believe is an international player now for Honduras on a regular basis over in Charlotte USL. Or is it Guatemala? I can't remember, one of those two nations. So he probably picked up quite a bit. I wonder where he stands in Ernst's eyes, but I certainly don't think that he would be the answer either. It'll be interesting to see who they bring in, whether it's a free agent, the free agency route, or if it's using some of that, you know, stored GAM to bring in people, or whatever the mechanism is that they've saved up so much of to bring in people to the roster for the 2025 season. But something needs to be upgraded there, because it's obvious that Chris Donovan's not, or Jim did not favor him once this new deal went into effect, because he sort of just faded.
Yeah. And Sam Adeniran obviously wasn't in. I mean, I don't blame the Union for kicking the tires on a guy who had less than 6 months left on his contract. See what you have. If he impresses, and you obviously give him a nice payday, but did nothing in his time here with the Union. Nelson Pierre, in 48 appearances with Union 2, he had 9 goals, 6 assists in just over 2,000 minutes played. Not terrible numbers, but, you know, there came a point where, you know, it seemed like he graduated. We talked last episode on players that had graduated from Union 2, Jesus Bueno, Jeremy Raffanello, and, you know, where do you send those guys? And I think we saw that with Nelson Pierre, that he was too good with Union too. Same thing with Brandan Craig. The Union tried to loan him out to Austin when they were desperate for center backs. Didn't work out. Then they loan him out to El Paso, and it doesn't work out there. It did at the beginning of the season, but then they bring in a new coach, and then unfortunately for Brandan, just fell out of favor there. So very interesting spot for Nelson Pierre. But the last thing that I want to bring up, and this can be briefly because we didn't really find too much information. We had a comment here from Dave DG on YouTube. He said, need a head coach. And yeah, we all know the Union need a head coach. Had a couple more comments from people asking for an update on the head coach. Ernst Tanner had mentioned today that he has a list of 10 coaches. Michael says he would love to see that list. And Ernst Tanner said that, yeah, look, we could potentially announce something soon, but we're going through the process of the league's procedures and in terms of interviewing candidates and whatnot. But I would expect there to be a new coach definitely before the preseason. Now, I know you and I maybe had joked, do we think that there's going to be a new head coach here by the time that the team takes off and heads to Florida? But hearing Ernst's comments that, look, there could be something potentially announced soon, that makes me feel confident that things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, Ernst's commentary today about the head coaching search was interesting. It sounds like he has his candidates and he's been working those names and sort of feels good about it. That if I recall, he even said, we're ready to submit to the league and we could be announcing something very, very soon. And it really comes down to the league sort of taking its time and working through the steps and the procedures that they need in terms of HR. So I don't know. I don't think it's crazy to think or maybe even imagine that maybe within the next week or two that there could be an announcement. Maybe, just maybe, who knows? But obviously the holiday in between now and then sort of derails that. So we'll see. I think, I don't know that I asked my question correctly to Ernst during the press conference because
you started talking about leadership, right?
Yeah, look, listen. What I asked was like, how far along, and I'm glad I followed up and said, let me ask my question again about the coaching. But my initial question was like, how far along is the club in the process of searching for a coach? And depending on when this person comes in, like, is he or she, whoever, is this coach going to have the flexibility to be involved in building this roster? Or are you just going to put something in place that, they'll just have to run with until the next window? And then he started talking about leadership and how, they have leaders all over the field, etc. So it sounds like something's imminent, but who knows? I've heard of a couple of names being floated around, one specific one that I think has legs, but we'll see.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. And again, I mean, trying to predict who the head coach will be, and it's as difficult as guessing what signings Ernst Tanner will bring into the club. But yeah, that's pretty much all the thoughts I had. And yeah, it's looking at the last time that I had a end of the season press conference, it was later in December. So this is the earliest that I've done something like this because, as we all know, the Union did not make the playoffs, and the playoffs have been very interesting. And I can see why Union fans are upset with New York Red Bulls facing off against Orlando City in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then you have out in the West, you have LA Galaxy and who's the other team? Oh my God. Oh, Seattle Sounders.
Seattle.
And
yeah.
So, yeah, Union fans are like, wow, look what Atlanta United did against Miami. That could have been us. Look what New York Red Bulls did against New York City. That could have been us. And yeah, the playoffs, I think, are definitely not going the way that MLS would have hoped this season, with MLS's darlings Inter Miami getting knocked out by Atlanta United, and then LAFC getting knocked out in the playoffs so early on. And yeah, obviously Columbus and Cincinnati getting knocked out in round one as well. So interesting times ahead, and hopefully we get good updates. And yeah, it sucks that it couldn't be the Union, but yeah, I'm glad the 2024 season's over and look forward to seeing what 2025 will bring. And yeah, should be a lot of movement, and we'll see what happens too with the MLS draft. Got to do an episode on the AAT sports feed with that. You, Mark Kelkenberg, and you guys keep asking me. I'm like, I don't know anything about the college game, so we got to do a draft preview show for the people, for the sickos out there. Keep the content going.
We'll have to get together, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm eager to see what the team does. I think setting the coach in place will maybe help us as talking heads, or whatever you want to call us, maybe start thinking about, what type of formation, what type of players profile that the team would be interested in. But ultimately, we all sort of already have an idea, considering who's at the helm in terms of Ernst Tanner. But beyond that, it's always a fun time to see how this team goes after players, and then hearing the stories afterwards of like, we tried but we didn't get this guy, or like, we were high on him, and it just didn't pan out, whatever. So yeah, I think unlike the last couple of years, this is a year where anything's on the table, and you can truly mean that, versus the last couple of years of just
running it back
over and over again. So exciting times ahead if you are into uncertainty, but if you are into certainty, this is not going to be the year for you. I think a lot of trial and error will happen, and that's okay. But that's also exciting because of a lot of the youth that I think will be involved, more than I think the last 5 years, probably.
For sure. Jose, where can people find you on social media?
Thank you. At Jose R Nunez 91. I have my Substack also pinned on there, and certainly on the AAT Sports feed with Mike Barrera and Dave Miller, who Dave is actually in Philadelphia from England, and he'll be having Thanksgiving at my house tomorrow. So I got to pick him up from the train station tomorrow, and I think he'll be tasting Thanksgiving food for the very first time ever in his life. He's so used to eating like it's World War I. So we're gonna have actual food with flavor in this house for him.
Yeah, I forgot that Dave's in town, and you had joked that he's finally gonna eat some good food and not just eating out of cans. I gotta share this last comment. I don't know what optimism this guy's feeling right now on Twitter. Dave DG, Philadelphia Union for eventual CONCACAF Champions League champions. If you can spread that energy to the rest of the fan base on social media, whatever you're drinking, you got to get the rest of the fans drinking that as well, because the fans on social media will not let you have that. But if you guys want to follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow Free Kick Pod, wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick, and check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/freekickpod, and the Substack, thefreekick.substack.com. But Jose, again, 3 episodes in a row, new record. I appreciate you joining me, and have a happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully Manchester City can get a win for you this weekend against Liverpool. That game against Feyenoord on Tuesday, unbelievable. Having a 3-goal lead, blowing it at the Etihad, tying 3-3. I mean, you're probably scratching your head out, just like Pep Guardiola too. Hopefully not saying his post-game comments that I saw came out and apologized for them. But yeah, have a happy Thanksgiving, Jose. As always, thank you guys for listening to the podcast, for all the support you guys give us, and until next time, we'll see you guys. I forget how I end this. Peace.